This video is brought to you by the 3 Minute Board Game patrons. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon. Kia ora koutou, and welcome to the 3 Minute Board Games Awards for 2024. This is a video where I'll run through a whole bunch of games that I really enjoyed over the last year, and a few that I really didn't. As with all award shows, there are some caveats. The 3 Minute Board Games Awards has a panel of one. That panel is me, so these awards are entirely my opinion. But that's great, because every single award show is the opinion of a small group of people, and they only have as much power as you give them. Another thing to note is 3 Minute Board Games does not do publisher-paid content. Any games awarded things are awarded them on their merit from my point of view, and not because the publisher paid to be here. 3 Minute Board Games is also an independent reviewer, which means we don't accept sponsorship from publishers at all, but we also don't push things like honey and BetterHelp down your throat. The way to keep us independent is to support us on Patreon or to join our YouTube membership. Now, with all that boring wonk out of the way, let's get on to the games of the year. The first category of award is for Foundation Games. Now, Foundation Games is a term I use instead of Gateway Games to describe rather simple games that have rock-solid mechanics in them. Things that aren't overwhelmingly complex, but are still very, very good games. And the winner of the Foundation Game Award this year is Ancient Knowledge. Ancient Knowledge is a card manipulation game, and it acts like you're part of a civilization building monuments, but it feels way more like you're an alien species coming along and collecting monuments like they're Pokemon. What happens in the game, though, is you have a whole bunch of cards that you play down into a row in front of you. And over time, these cards will slide off the row and gain bonuses when they're removed from your culture. And there's so much card interaction and card play and different engines you can build within this game to take advantage of this sliding system. It's a game that initially doesn't look like much when you look at it, but as soon as you put it on the table and start playing it, you see the real depth of decision making that's involved in Ancient Knowledge. Honestly, the theme is a bit of a mess, but the game systems and the gameplay loop it has and the decisions you have to make through the game are all really excellent. And that's what makes Ancient Knowledge my Foundation game of 2024. The next award is for small box games. Games that come in small packages that generally have low play times, low complexity, and are very easy to pick up and play. This one's a little on the big side as far as small box games. It's Castle Combo. Now, Castle Combo is all about drafting cards and building sets. The core gameplay here is you're collecting a 3x3 grid of cards, and each card has its own way it combos and scores points. And it's how you draft these cards and lay them out into your grid to maximize their points that makes Castle Combo really engaging immediately. Rules-wise, it's a very simple game, but as you're playing it, you'll be sitting there evaluating each card going, ooh, where can I slot this one in, and how can I maximize the points I'll get off it? I had a really good time with Castle Combo recently, and there's going to be a proper 3 Minute Board Games review of it coming out shortly. So yeah, Castle Combo. It's 9 card plays each, it's drafting, it's set collection, and it's really fun. This award is for the best game from Aotearoa, New Zealand over the last year, and I'm not going to give it out now. And that's because my overall game of the year is also going to win this award, so we'll keep that till later. But just so you know, I have this award still, I've given it out every year, but this year it's the first time it's going to the grand winner. So for solo game of the year, I like to pick a game that is solo focused, or at least I feel like is a solo focused game, more than it is just another game that has a great solo mode. And I have 2 winners for it this year. I'm going to split the prize, and that's because of a technicality. And that technicality is that I reviewed a game this year that isn't going to be out until next year. And that game is The Anarchy. Now, The Anarchy is the sequel to Hadrian's Wall by Bobby Hill, published by Garfield Games. And it takes everything you'd expect from Hadrian's Wall, which was to take roll and write and dial it up to 11. The Anarchy dials it up to 15. It just keeps dialing up what I would expect out of a roll and write style game. There is so much happening in The Anarchy, but I feel like it has stronger and more meaningful decision points than Hadrian's Wall did. It's a really good game. Now, it's marketed as a group game, but honestly, it is going to be a solo hit. I don't see groups playing this very much. I see it very much being catering to a solo audience first and foremost. And that was going to hit in 2025. People will start playing it there, and you'll see it pick up a whole bunch of solo awards from a whole bunch of people, because it is so much. And I mean that in a complimentary way. It's a game that you sit down and you know, I'm in for a test. I'm in for a challenge. I have to learn this game. I have to master all the systems, and then I have to figure out, what to do with it. And then I have to play through the campaign and adapt my strategy in each game to fit the various goals and needs that are happening. The Anarchy is a solo player's dream game, and anyone who loves the roll and write format and wants something bigger, bolder, brasher, and deeper in that format will really have a good time with the Anarchy. I think Bobby's done a really great job here. And full disclosure, I know Bobby, he's a friend of mine, but this is a very good game, and I'm judging it on its merits, not just because I like the bloke. The second game to win this award is Halls of Hegra. And Halls of Hegra is a solo-only game. And it's a solo-only game about a siege in Norway, where you are the Norwegians defending against the Nazis, and you're trying to hold on as long as you can. This game goes through a whole bunch of different stages, where first you're gathering resources, then you're shoring up the fort, and then the attacks get more and more and more pressing and desperate and dangerous towards the end. It's so hard. Like, this is a super hard game. You'll get so frustrated with it because you'll make some bad decisions early on, and they'll ruin you. And you'll have to keep playing it and playing it and playing it until you finally master the game. And then it's still a really good challenge. This is a fantastic solo game for several reasons. One, it's designed for solo play, and that to me, that's a huge plus. Secondly, it's got a really interesting and engaging theme. Mechanically, it feels somewhat unique. It feels like its own thing. It's got a little bit of worker placement elements mixed with some classic wargaming stuff. It's its own unique experience. So yeah, if you're into solo gaming and you want a solo gaming challenge, try Halls of Hegra. So my two winners for the solo game of the year are the Anarchy and Halls of Hegra. I have two new awards this year, and the first one of those awards is the Under the Radar game. This is for a game that you probably haven't heard of, and if you have heard of it, well, don't call me on that. I'm picking relatively obscure games that I think have something extra special in them, just to showcase that game to a wider audience that might not normally have seen it. The intent for this award is just to shine that light on something odd and go, hey, check out that odd game over there. You probably haven't considered that one before. And this year, the award goes to Derokar, The Week of Five Presidents. This is a historic game, but it's not a historic war game. It's a historic influence game. It's a historic politicking and betrayal and backstabbing type game. And it's about a period in Argentina's history, not too long ago, 20 odd years ago, where they had a cash crisis, an inflationary crisis. And there were runs on the banks, there were riots in the streets, money became worthless overnight, and the president resigned. Then his replacement got put in the job, and he resigned. And someone else came along, looked at the books and went, I can't fix this problem. And they resigned. In 1 week, they went through 5 presidents in the country because no one could get a handle on this runaway financial crisis. And that's the game. You are playing the various leaders in Argentina at that time, and you're trying to build up and consolidate a power base while also defaming other people and trying to secret away money and riding the economy as it collapses. It's fascinating. You can pass laws, you can declare martial law, you can hold press conferences to try to get rid of your bad PR. It's a fascinating game about a financial meltdown and the scramble for power, because the win conditions are really, really clever. You either, one person's president at any time, and they're the player with the most resources. If the debt problem is dealt with, and that's all solved, the current president wins. So the current president wants to solve the problem. Everyone else kind of wants to drag the game out a little bit longer in order for themselves to become president. Or if at any point the players have accumulated too much negative press, the current president will win. Or there's an opportunity get on a helicopter and steal the win. It's very, very interesting how it all plays out. It's chaotic, has lots of table talk and backstabbing. There's a card drafting and set collection mechanic in it as well, but it's different, and it's also a living part of history, and a part of history that I imagine not a lot of people in the English-speaking world are very familiar with. So yeah, I found Derek, the Week of 5 Presidents, an absolute delight, and I'm also going to do a full review of that coming up as well. I held off doing that because I didn't think there would be that much interest in the game, because it's a slightly obscure title from a moderately obscure publisher, but such a good game, I'm going to give it a dedicated video, and that'll come out probably in February. So yes, my best under-the-radar game of 2024 was Derek, the Week of 5 Presidents. The next new award is for Best Art Direction, and I'm giving out this award because of the number of publishers that are starting to look towards using AI-generated images instead of actual art, something I find quite repellent. So in order to sort of counteract that, I'm going to use my awards to shine a spotlight on what I think is some great artistic endeavors happening out there. I personally am very big on using quality art in board games, and you'll see that with my own board games. Red Dust Rebellion, we have fantastic artwork in that one, and also Shadow Moon Syndicates. In both my games, I feel we went above and above on the art direction, and we got fantastic artists and fantastic image. And for me, that's part of what makes the board game medium a special medium, is that it's something you play, but it's an art form because you play a game, and the interpreting the game is a work of art in itself, but also the visual imagery in here. We've had tons and tons of talented artists over the year deliver striking games with beautiful art, and I think it's something we should really appreciate as part of the hobby. And before we get on to giving out the award, I'll give an honourable mention to 2 games from Stonemaier Games, Wormspan and Expeditions. They're the runners-up this year. Stonemaier Games consistently do amazing presentations on their games, and these 2 games, which I reviewed last year, are no different. Beautiful art from the artists involved here, and yeah, Expeditions in particular was really, really handsome. And I love the book in Wormspan that has all the different dragons in it. I think that's beautiful work. But they get edged out by sort of another slightly under the radar game, and that game is Netrunner, the new Netrunner by Null Signal Games. So as you might know, Android Netrunner was around for years, and it was made by Fantasy Flight Games. And Fantasy Flight Games had a very distinctive and wonderful art style that I loved. They went all the way through Netrunner. So when Netrunner stopped being published, a group of fans picked it up and tried keeping the game alive. And in the last couple of years, they've been able to formally do this and be able to sell the games. And that's brought Netrunner back to life, and that group is Null Signal Games. But the reason I'm giving them a shout out here is the art they have on this, not-for-profit game is the same caliber, the same quality, and the same overall feel as original Netrunner. It doesn't look like fan-made content. It looks like new official content. The artwork just fits into the world perfectly, and whoever is responsible for those decisions and for getting those artists on board and briefing them and showing them this is the world we want to create, and actually realizing that, so you have these new Netrunner cards that fit perfectly in the world, I take my hat off to them. And that's why Netrunner from Null Signal Games is my inaugural winner for the best art direction in board games in 2024. Next up is the best new to me game. Now, this is a game that's been out for a couple of years, but it's something I've only just discovered. And this should be hardly surprising. There are thousands of board games that come out each year. I'm not going to get to each and every one of them as soon as they're released, even some classic games. And the one I'm going to give this to is a bit of a classic Euro game. But I'll give an honourable mention out first to Clank in Space. I haven't played any of the Clank games before this year. I picked Clank in Space to be the one I wanted to play, and I absolutely adore it. I love the push your luck system in this. I love the goofiness of it. I love the different setups. I just love the overall tempo and feel of the game. I'm a big fan of deck building games that allow you to do something, and Clank in Space is a deck building game that allows me to steal stuff, and that's pretty nifty. I also just love how brutal it gets at the end with players dropping like flies. But my winner for best new game to me is Hansa Teutonica. This game looks dull as dull could be dull. It looks like a game where you're putting cubes on a map and that's about it. But it's brutal, it's mean, it is the nastiest, most horrible, vicious, infighting, bitchy game you can possibly find, and I find it fascinating and rewarding and engaging and brilliant because of that. The core of the game is, yes, you are putting cubes on the map, but you get so many rewards if someone pushes your cube out of the way. So it's all about just getting in everyone's way. It's about playing in a way that forces your opponents to give you free stuff all the time. And it's so petty. It is... it's hard to describe just how vicious and nasty and hilarious a game it is. I would not play it with people who don't like having setbacks in their game, because playing a game of Hansa Teutonica is a constant series of setbacks. But if you can embrace the ethos of the game, the pettiness of it, and also appreciate the puzzle that you're trying to solve here as well, because it's not just about being a vindictive shit the whole time. It is about building the right networks and getting into the right places and getting the right powers at the right time. And it's very clever in that regard. So yes, I absolutely think this is a top tier game. I'm really glad to have finally played it, and it's going on the forever shelf. It's an absolute keeper. So yeah, my best new game to me this year is Hansa Teutonica. It's evil, give it a go. Now, every year on the Patreon, we have a Patron's Choice Award, and this year we got down to 5 finalists. And of those finalists, here are the runners-up. The first one is Voidfall. Then we had Slay the Spire, Daybreak, and June Imperium Uprising. All 4 of those games are excellent games, and I can absolutely see why the Patreon community for 3-Minute Board Games back them. Excellent choices. But the number 1 game picked by the patrons of 3-Minute Board Games as their game of the year is Arcs from Letter Games. And this is hardly surprising. Arcs has been a bit of a revelation. I finally played through the Blighted Reach campaign, and that was an experience. I think I need to play it a couple more times to have like a really properly informed opinion on it, but it was interesting. It was a very different type of space opera than you would expect from, say, a Twilight Imperium or an Eclipse, where all of those games sort of build to a crescendo and then sort of the game ends. And Arcs, it's like things are happening, and especially in Blighted Reach, where you can completely crash out and be suffering and not doing very well at all in the first and second acts of the game, and then come roaring back and steal the win. Arcs is a space opera game, but it gets rid of so much of the bloat in this genre by simplifying a lot of your economy and a lot of your action systems into one trick-taking game. And based on who wins those tricks, that sets the tempo for the game. And it allows for stunning reversals and just dramatic changes in the board state. Arcs is an exceptional game, and I can absolutely see why my patrons picked this as their game of the year. And spoiler alert, it's going to be in my top 5 as well. Now that would normally bring us to our final award, the Golden KGY Award for the year, which I would give out to my single best game overall in 2024. But this year I've decided to do things a little differently. Instead of just having the number 1 game that I give the award to, I'm going to have a top 5. And not just that, I'm also going to have a bottom 5. Part of the reason I want to do this is I keep seeing threads all over the place where people talk about negative reviews being more honest. And I'm not sure I agree with that at all. I'm not sure just ragging on a game counts as being more honest than praising something you genuinely liked. But in the interest of fairness and balance, I feel like it's a good idea to call out 5 games that didn't work well for me, while I'm going to praise 5 games that I thought were absolutely excellent. Now the funny thing is, a lot of these 5 games are really popular games that were huge hits with other people. And in the grand scheme of things, just because I don't like a game doesn't really mean much. These are just games that were flat out misses for me. My bottom 5 in descending order are Star Trek Away Missions, This looked like it was going to be a fun Star Trek skirmish game, but ultimately there's not enough game there. I feel the game's core gameplay loop was pretty average, and it felt like just an excuse to sell you Star Trek toys. Also, skirmish games need a community, and I don't think this is ever going to get one. Number 4, Hegemony. I felt like this was a game where 4 people were assigned to different stations in an office, and in your station you had to do your job. And there were so many levers in the game pushing everything to the middle, that ultimately the game felt like it played itself. It's an incredibly interconnected game, but at no point playing it did I feel that my decisions overcame the inertia built into the game. I'd be far more forgiving of the game if it didn't take itself so seriously. Number 3, SkyTeam. I do not get why this game is so popular. To Steph and I, it felt like we were collaboratively playing a game of tic-tac-toe to a draw without any form of communication. There didn't seem to be enough meaningful decisions to add any real tension. We either had the dice we needed or we didn't. I know some people out there have some really fun experiences with SkyTeam, but for us there was zero drama whatsoever. Number 2, Waterfall Park. I love Chinatown, and I was really looking forward to this as a reworking and reimagining of that great game. The problems are that the mechanical rework of the game is just bad. It makes the game shorter, but it makes everything more random and predetermined. Also, the theme is absolute nonsense. In Chinatown, different families trading blocks of land in order to build stores, that made sense. But who is competitively working to build different things inside the same water park? Absolutely a wasted opportunity. And my number 1 least favorite game of 2024 is Mythwind. This is barely a game to me. This is an activity. The difference between Mythwind and watching paint dry is at the end of watching paint dry, you have something with dry paint on it. I found Mythwind to be an absolute chore that went nowhere, took a hell of a lot of time, and didn't offer anything back. Some people, this might be a great game. For me, it's an absolute time sink. That was the games I did not particularly care for this year. So let's rapidly change pace and go for the 5 games that I really liked. We'll start with my number 5 game, Raising Robots. There's no doubt about it, Wingspan is a huge influence on this game, but I found it in every way, shape or form a superior game. It had a far more interesting decision space, it had a theme I liked, and I just loved all the things you could do inside Raising Robots to build engines and chain effects. To me, Raising Robots is Wingspan with rocket boots attached and a death laser strapped to its head. My number 4 favorite game of the year was Daybreak. Daybreak is the latest in a long line of cooperative games from Matt Leacock, the guy known for the Forbidden Island series, Pandemic, and a whole bunch of other cooperative games, including one of my favorites, Thunderbirds. Daybreak is his take on climate change. It's a cooperative engine building game that uses elements from things like terraforming Mars. But what I really love about this game is that there are only 5 actions you can take each turn. You can only have 5 projects in play. So instead of having a sprawling table like you would in Terraforming Mars with 100 different effects going on, here you have to have 5, and you have to focus on them and build them up, and then change them in and out as the board state changes. I think there's a really great decision space in Daybreak. I think it's got an amazingly well-researched theme, and it's a very intense and engaging cooperative game. My number 3 game of the year is Dune Imperium Uprising. I didn't care much for Dune Imperium when it came out. I've said that before multiple times. I played it just after Lost Ruins of Arnak, and I was a little bit over this combination of worker placement and deck building. I thought it was a little bit meh, but the game grew on me over the years afterwards, and it steadily built up in my estimation. But I always thought, the one thing this game needs is a little bit more cutthroat action. And then Dune Imperium Uprising came out, and it delivered exactly what I wanted. It took the stuff that was successful in Dune Imperium that everyone loved, but it added in more fisticuffs, and it made the fights more important, more vital, and more cutthroat. I don't know what to call Dune Imperium Uprising. It's not quite a second edition. It's almost like a patch of the game. Whatever it is, it fixed a whole bunch of things I didn't quite like about the original game and made it into one of my favorites. My number 2 game of the year is the Patron's Choice Game of the Year, Arcs from Leader Games. Everything I said about Arcs earlier, I'm going to reiterate here. I love how swingy it is. I love how dynamic it is. I love that it got rid of so much of the busy work and chaff that you have in a 4X game of managing ships and tech trees and all that kind of stuff. And I just love how dramatic the game can be. Time will tell how I feel about the Blighted Reach campaign. but after a first playthrough, I think it's pretty damn clever. I need to see more though. But Arx, just as a standalone game, is my number 2 game of the year. Now we're on to the final game of the year, my number 1 game of the year, and also the winner of the best game from Aotearoa New Zealand Award as well. Just a bit of a disclaimer, I've known the designers of this game for quite a while. One in particular I've known for over 20 years. That said, I didn't review their last game because it had depictions of slavery in it. But in this game, they took the core ideas from their previous games, Endeavour and Endeavour Age of Sail, and turned them into something magical, Endeavour Deep Sea. There is a bunch I love about Endeavour Deep Sea. The first of all is the expanding board. As you play through the game, you go deeper and deeper into the oceans and discover things. I think that's neat. Secondly, I love the really tight engine building in this game. Every decision matters. You have limited actions and you absolutely have to maximize them and create chain effects all the way through the game to get the best score. Thirdly, it has a ton of different scenarios which test different facets of the game. So you can't just get into a pattern of deciding what is the best course of action each time. You need to adapt and change based on the map that's being built in front of you and the scenario you're trying to fulfill. 4, it has a stunning solo mode, a really challenging and engaging solo mode, and could easily have taken out my solo game of the year if it hadn't have won these 2 awards as well. And finally, it just has a really cool theme. Deep sea exploration is just neato, and I feel it took everything good from Endeavour Age of Sail. All of the mechanics that worked really well in that game, and linked them to a theme that I engage with much more to create something truly special. So Endeavour Deep Sea is our game of the year. So that's our awards for the year, with Endeavour Deep Sea winning 2 big awards. If you want to give me your top 5 and bottom 5 games of the year, just post them in the comments below and we'll talk about them. And if there's any game I missed that you think I'd like, just let me know in the comments below. Because I'm usually 6 months behind getting games anyway, there's a very good chance that something you're playing right now will be something I'll be playing in 6 months' time. Especially if you tell me about it right now. And just a reminder, 3 Minute Board Games does not do paid content. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon. And thank you from Stephanie, Anne and myself to all our patrons who backed us over the last year. You keep the channel going. Thank you so much. Take care.